Welcome to a world with limitless possibilities. A world where pain and suffering are matched only by the sounds of those who endure it. Welcome to your nightmare.
Welcome to your nightmare.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Nightmare. Tonight we're talking about silence. We all chase it, don't we? We buy noise-canceling headphones, we take long walks in the woods, we seek out isolated places just to escape the constant roar of the modern world. We think of silence as a blank canvas, safe and empty. But tonight's story might make you reconsider the quiet. Because sometimes, when the world goes completely still, you realize the silence isn't empty at all. Sometimes it's just waiting for you to hear what's hiding right beneath it. Turn down the lights, lock your doors, and get close to the speakers. This is The Whispering Wall. I've always been someone who values silence. Maybe that's why I bought the house on Blackwood Lane. It sits at the very end of a dead-end road, surrounded by thick, overgrown pines that shallow up any sound from the highway. The previous owner had passed away inside, and had sat empty for years, so I got it for a steal. For the first few weeks, it was paradise. Just me, my books, and the absolute stillness of the woods. But old houses have a way of settling. They creak, they groan. You learn to tune it out until the sounds stop formatting themselves like a house. It started on a Tuesday, right around 3 a.m. I woke up out of a dead sleep. Not because of a loud noise, but because of a total absence of it. The wind outside had died. My refrigerator, which usually hummed in the kitchen, was dead silent. And then I heard it. A faint rhythmic scratching sound. It was coming from the drywall right next to my head, inside the master bedroom wall. My first thought was mice. Frustrating but normal for an old house near the woods. I wrapped my knuckles against the hard, drywall. "Hey, shoo!" I muttered. The scratching stopped instantly. I went back to sleep. The next night, it came back at exactly the same time. I rolled over, sighed, and knocked on the wall again. But this time it didn't stop. In fact, the moment my knuckles left the drywall, something knocked back. A single deliberate knock from inside the wall, right where my hand had been. I froze, my heart doing a sudden, violent flip in my chest. Mice don't mimic you. I sat up in my bed, staring at the blank, beige paint in the dim moonlight. I reached out a trembling hand and knocked twice. From inside the dark cavity of the wall, two distinct thumps answered. I got out of bed so fast I nearly tripped over my own sheets. I grabbed my phone, I turned the flashlight on and shined it at the wall. The paint was smooth, no cracks, no holes. I tried to tell myself it was a plumbing issue. Air bubbles in the pipes expanding and contracting. Yeah, that had to be it. I slept on the living room couch for the rest of the night. The next day, I decided to do some investigating. I went down to the basement facility underneath my bedroom. I wanted to see the pipes. I carried a heavy flashlight and navigated the damp concrete floor until I was standing beneath the master bedroom. There were no water pipes running up into that specific wall, just solid wooden joists and the underneath of my floorboards. But as I stood there in the chilly basement air, I noticed something else. A draft. a tiny freezing current of air blowing against the back of my neck. I turned around. Tucked behind the old, rusted water heater was a small, square wooden door built into the foundation wall. It was painted the same dull gray as the concrete, completely hidden unless you were looking for it, and it was secured by a heavy iron latch. I walked over, my shoes crunching on the grit of the basement floor. I reached out and lifted the latch. It resisted, groaning with years of rust, before finally popping open. It wasn't a crawl space. It was a narrow, vertical shaft, a dead space built between the inner drywall and the outer brick of the house. It ran straight up, all the way up to the second floor, to my bedroom, and nailed to the inside of the shaft were old rusted iron railroad spikes, placed one above the other like a makeshift ladder leading up into the dark. I stared into the black chute, the smell of old dirt and wet copper filling my nose. Why would anyone build a secret ladder inside the walls of a house? Suddenly, a tiny piece of plaster dried up and dropped from somewhere up high in the shaft. It fell through the dark and clinked right against my flashlight lens. I flinched, slammed the wooden door shut, threw the latch, and ran upstairs. I should have left the house right then. I know that. But when you've put your entire life savings into a property, your brain will construct any lie it needs to keep you from admitting you made a mistake. I told myself the previous owner was probably just an eccentric old man, built a weird hiding spot during the Cold War. It was empty now. It didn't matter. I went to bed that night determined to ignore it. I kept the bedroom TV on, the volume turned up to drown out any phantom noises. By 2:50 a.m., I was drifting off. By 3 a.m., the TV suddenly went black. The power didn't cut out. The indicator light was still blue, but the screen just went dark, plunging the room into a deep, heavy shadow. And then the sound returned. But it wasn't scratching, and it wasn't knocking. It was a wet, scraping sound. The sound of bare skin, dragging slowly against rough wood. It was coming from inside the wall, starting from the floorboards and moving upward, step by step. Someone or something was climbing these iron spikes. I couldn't move. Fear is a physical weight. It sits on your chest and paralyzes your limbs. I lay there, staring at the wall, watching the space right next to my head. The sliding sound stopped, right at head height. Whatever was in the wall was now standing directly behind the drywall, inches from my face. Then came the breathing. It was a wet, rattling wheeze. The sound of fluid-filled lungs struggling for air, and with the breath came a voice. It didn't sound human. It sounded like two dry stones grinding together, whispering through the plaster. "So warm," the wall whispered. My breath caught in my throat. Tears of pure terror pricked the corner of my eyes. "Let me in. It's so cold down here. Let me into the warmth." Then a horrific wet thud slammed against the drywall, so hard the paint actually cracked. A pale, skeletal bulge pressed against the plaster from the inside, outlining the shape of 5 long, impossibly sharp fingers trying to tear their way through the drywall. That broke the paralysis. I screamed, a raw, ugly sound, and threw myself out of the bed. I didn't grab my keys, I didn't grab my shoes. I ran out of the room, tore down the stairs, and burst through the front door into the freezing air night. I ran down Blackwood Lane in my bare feet, sprinting through the gravel and the pine needles until I reached the main highway. I didn't stop until I flagged down a passing trucker, who took one look at my bleeding feet and my hysterical face and dialed the police. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the back of a police cruiser, wrapped in a blanket, watching the flashing red and blue lights paint the front of my house. 2 deputies went inside. They searched the main floors. Nothing. Then they went into the basement. I watched through the windshield as one of the deputies came out of the front door. He wasn't walking calmly. He was pale. His radio clutched tightly in his shaking hand, calling for backup and an ambulance. I learned the truth later from the police reports. They had found the hidden wooden door behind the water heater. The heavy iron latch I had locked had been broken off from the inside. When they shone their tactical lights up into the vertical shaft, they didn't find a ghost. They found a man, or what was left of one. It was a drifter who had gone missing in the area 3 years prior. He had climbed into the walls of the abandoned house to find shelter from a winter storm and had somehow gotten wedged tightly between the brick and the drywall. He had died there, trapped in the dark. The coroner said his body had been completely mummified by the dry air in the walls. His fingers were worn down to the bone from years of clawing at the wood. The deputy told me they had cut away the drywall in my bedroom to get him out. He said the man's face was pressed directly against the back of the plaster, right where my pillow had been. I never went back to that house. I sold it at a massive loss to a corporate developer who tore it down to build a parking lot. I live in a modern glass and steel apartment complex now. No drywall, just concrete and floor-to-ceiling windows. I thought I was safe. But last night, I woke up at 3 a.m. The apartment was perfectly silent. The city outside was dead. And then, from the solid, reinforced concrete floors directly beneath my bed, I heard a faint rhythmic scratching, and a voice, muffled by inches of stone, whispered, "I found the warmth." I haven't slept in my bed since last night. I'm sitting in a 24-hour diner right now, surrounded by people, noise, and bright fluorescent lights. I don't think I'll ever go back to that apartment. Because concrete can be broken and stone can be tunneled through. If it wants in, it'll get in. I want to thank you all for spending your night with me here on Nightmare. And as always, if you haven't done so already, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you have any story suggestions, please reach out to me at nightmarepod@gmail.com. And until next time, sleep well.